Okay. There's a 30-second delay, so they should be able to see us in just a second. Okay, we're live. All right, everybody. We're all in here together. So today, welcome to the Jewelry Makers Guild podcast.
They should be able to see us in just a second. Okay, we're live.
Great. Hi, everyone.
All right, everybody. We're all in here together. So today, welcome to the Jewelry Makers Guild podcast. They should be able to see us in just a second. Live.
Hi, everyone.
All right, everybody. We're all in here together. So today, welcome to the Jewelry Makers Guild podcast. They should be able to see us.
On my computer. How's that?
Welcome to the Jewelry.
I can hear you.
All right, everybody, we had a tiny little glitch, but we're ready to go. So today is our first ever Jewelry Makers Guild podcast where we're diving into the creative driving forces of our fellow jewelers. I'm Tonya Davidson, the creator of Jewelry Makers Guild and a fellow maker of 24 years. In my quest to learn as much as I can, try as many techniques and materials, and to share the information with other artists, I thought this would be a great thing to do. It's fun to find out what inspires my fellow artists and makes their work so dang good. So please help me welcome to this very first podcast, my friend and one of my favorite teachers, Jayne Redman.
Thank you so much for having me, Tonya. It's really great to see you. We hope to get to see you in person someday really soon.
Yeah, that would be good. I think all of us want to take a flight somewhere to see everybody.
Yeah, we do.
For those of you who don't know Jayne's story, Jayne was born and raised in Portland, Maine, and in fact, she still lives there. She has been making jewelry since her senior year in high school at Deering High School, and she knew right away that she was meant to pursue a career as a metalsmith. She attended the Portland School of Fine and Applied Arts, which is now the Maine College of Arts, which you probably have heard of. She started teaching while still as an undergraduate. In 1977, after graduating, she developed the Continuing Studies program for adults in jewelry and metals. So she's been an educator before she was even an educator. Her first years were ones of experimentation. She started with fashion jewelry, working as a design and production assistant before becoming the owner of her own company. She realized that she wanted to explore a single direction with her work rather than designing according to the trends. So smart. And she ended her fashion jewelry company and began creating in collections that she marketed through art jewelry shows such as the American Craft Council shows and the Buyers Market of American Crafts. She says her collections required many attempts and weren't successful immediately, which makes me feel so much better. And it took her 3 tries to discover the right combination of look and price point before she was able to market her work correctly. The most important exercise she says she did was to make a list of the kinds of techniques and design inspiration she knew she would enjoy working with every day. Well, some of us need a lifetime to figure that out first. And determining the price point she felt would be sustainable for the direction of her collection. She listed the problems she had learned to avoid. In other words, she developed a business plan. That collection, Floriforms, which she started in 1994, is the one she is still adding to and selling today. And that's how you know you've got it right, is when you still have the same collection from 1994. So, in order to produce it efficiently, though, she knew that she needed to develop a series of tools and jigs that she now manufactures for sale on her website to students and through Rio Grande. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you will see her website, JayneRedmanJewelry.com, her Facebook page, and her Instagram page. So if you want to connect with her on social media, there's the information, and we will make sure we put it in the comments section after we finish the video, the podcast. Okay, so welcome, Jayne, and thank you for being my first guinea pig and joining me today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So let's jump in. My first pick your brain question is, I'm curious, what was your earliest memory about making jewelry?
Well, I took my first class in jewelry making when I was in high school, right here in Portland, Maine, at Deering High School. I was a senior, so I was 17, and the class was a crafts class. My teacher at the time was Gary Beckwith, and he was a jeweler, so he brought that into a little portion of the art room, and we did copper enameling, and then went on to do jewelry work, which included casting and forging, soldering, and the whole 9 yards. So pretty advanced for a high school situation.
Wow, yeah. I had home ec.
Yeah, right.
And wood shop.
Oh, Gary was the first person who really made it clear to me that I had a three-dimensional brain. And I had always enjoyed art, but felt frustrated because I didn't draw very well, and come to find out it's because I see all three sides of something, and the top and the bottom. So when I'm thinking about drawing something flatly, I also understand what the back looks like too.
Can I have your brain?
Try to get that in there. So he was the first person who recognized that about me, and he was really my big mentor. We spent a lot of time together that year. I was able to spend pretty much all of my second semester in the art room. I had already had enough credits to graduate mid-year. So he just let me have at it. And I would work every day until sometimes 4 o'clock.
Wow, that's the kind of mentor you were.
Yeah, he was great.
Most people don't get lucky enough to have a mentor like that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well,
so I knew immediately that I would go right straight to art school. That's what I did.
Sounds like the stars align for sure. Speaking of that, so sometimes I refer when I'm talking to my students about the perfect stew, or sometimes I talk about a quilt and how people that come into your life, they're like that square, and that all those squares make up the quilt. And then a stew, there's, sometimes there's things that you put in the stew that your mom doesn't tell you, and it makes it so great, but it's like the secret stew. And so I'm curious, if you can look back at your art now and the person that you've become as an artist, what do you think makes up that perfect stew? And what sort of ingredients would you have thrown into the pot now looking back as retrospectively that made you into the artist you are? And if you don't mind, you'll need to speak into the mic just a little bit closer.
Okay.
Great.
So I would have to say that access to education was the key thing for me. To first of all be able to have my wonderful first mentor, Gary Beckwith, as my high school art teacher, and then my second mentor, Ernest Thompson, who was the head of the metals department at the Portland School of Art. And his background was as a silversmith, working in the industry, places like Reed and Barton, all of the big silversmithing companies down there in Providence. And he worked as an apprentice under many of the sort of old school European taught jewelers. And he brought that sensibility to our classroom. So we were not allowed to touch a flex shaft until we actually learned how to do everything by hand.
Wow.
Which I think was really instrumental in me learning just naturally how to modify That totally comes second nature to me. We were also taught how to make our own tools if there wasn't one right handy. So really, really great education. He also felt history was very important. So we studied people like Fabergé and Lalique, and Art Nouveau is my favorite thing.
Oh, wow.
So really going back to answer your question, I have to say that access to education was really key, and also having the support that I did from my mentors and also my parents.
Yeah, getting that support is incredible. And when you don't have it, it either takes you longer, or you flail, or you get frustrated and quit. So unfortunately, that happens to some people, but thankfully that didn't happen to you.
Thankfully.
So as I ask you the next few questions, I'm going to be showing some of your work. So they will be able to see your work as you're talking about what inspires you and how you decided to make some of this work. And so my next question for you is, I think personally that the best art is made by people who are driven by an underlying need to communicate or leave their mark or express themselves or tell a story. So what is it that drives your work? And we're going to start with the cactus earrings. We have those up first, but we're going to go through a bunch of your pieces.
Okay. So I would say that same kind of Art Nouveau sensibility, the curvilinear aspect, really is a common thread throughout everything that I have made, and all the various collections that I've had over the years as well. And I love engineering. Obviously, integrating mechanics with design is truly my thing. I use nature as my inspiration. So again, back to the Art Nouveau. And I'm always looking to combine form and function in my work as well. Mm-hmm. So in other words, I don't want to just put a commercial finding, for instance, on an earring. I want the method, the mechanism of hanging or wearing that piece also to be part of the design. Sometimes I think I find that the engineering part also comes from nature. So in a lot of these pieces, you'll see the influence of, say, how a stem or a petal are attached to each other, and how a leaf works its way in with others, and that also is common thread.
So you must have a nice garden.
I do. I love it.
Because your florals are amazing. Love them. Well, the reason why I connected with you, I've taken classes from you and I love your work, but your engineering mind was a high for me when I was in your class. I was just like, I just want to scoop out her brains and suck them up, because I love the how and why of things. Don't just tell me to do something, tell me the how and the why. And you were so great at always connecting the engineering parts of things and thinking things through, and the way your brain works is just phenomenal.
I do like to say that I don't teach students. I teach students how to fish. I don't give them the fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought for sure you would help me cheat on my earring thing, and you did not. So along those lines, we put so much of ourselves into our work that I think there's two kinds of artists. One that gets really connected to and attached to their work and has a hard time letting it go or sell it. And then for others, it's about the journey of the making of the piece, and they really could care less about the piece after it's finished. They're just on to the next idea. So what is more of a drive for you, and why?
I think the process definitely is the most important part for me, and problem solving, the engineering part, is what truly makes me tick. It makes me happy to get up in the morning and get down to my studio. Selling it is sort of a sideline. It's the happy thing that happens as well, but that's an afterthought almost.
Yeah.
I just love getting lost in the process.
Yeah, it's very intoxicating, I think. It's the only reason why I create, for sure. So I have a picture up of one of your pieces, and we know as you created these complicated, interesting pieces, they have so many parts, which is so intriguing to me, how you broke things apart and you noticed how things were connected. And then you realized that as you were making these pieces, you needed to become more efficient. So tell us what the impetus was for creating and innovating your own tools to get you to this place that you could make things faster and easier.
Well, I would say I would have to take it back to marketing. That when I first sat down to design this particular collection, I wanted to reach a certain price point. And in order to do that, I had to think about how to make things more efficiently. I also had to think about the materials that I would use, because I wanted to have a three-dimensional collection where I was creating volume, but my pieces would be very lightweight.
Yeah.
That led me to, and I've always really loved working with metal in sheet form. So that led me to know that I would need to be using blanking dies, because I would need to be able to quickly cut out these pieces. And also, just because of the way I wanted them to fit together, I would need to be making my own forming tools and jigs to keep everything, very precise, and also be able to work faster.
So I have a picture up of how to make your blanking die, which it's a little hard to see on this slide because you're just basically seeing the shapes, but it's so interesting to understand how you came across figuring out how to saw these out at the right angle so that when it cut the metal, it cut it without it getting jammed up in the metal. And then how to devise I'll go back to your bench pin system, which tilts and rotates so it's at the right angle for cutting that cut. Did you, I know your father was a machinist, so were you able to pick his brain, or how did you come up with learning, how that needed to be cut?
I took a workshop in die forming with Lee Marshall,
Okay.
and he was the first person who taught me how to make blanking dies. And I drew on that when I developed the Floriforms collection that I have now. So he's another great mentor.
Yeah. I have a slide up of your earring jig, and I have my own here, but which I'm now obsessed with getting more materials and making these with the thermoplastic and putting it into my bench pin. It just, the way that it all fitted together was really smart. I could screw it in and it's right there. And then of course I have your new tool, which screws into that same bench pin. But this is a picture for those of you that are on the podcast showing her jigs that she teaches in her classes. And then also it's on top of her bench pin. And it's really an ingenious way to have the same ear wires match, but to make different styles of ear wires quickly. And they're always going to match, and it makes it so much easier. So that saved me time every single time I finish a pair of earrings. I love it. So I appreciate that. And then the next slide is, of course, then you probably realize that tool organization, as you see behind me, is a never-ending obsession for some of us. So you've created some of your tool jigs to be able to store your tools efficiently as well.
That came from teaching, actually. I developed that plier stand first in Masonite so that I could bring it with me to workshops, because I was forever losing things on my bench top as I was teaching.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, I want that. So I had it made in aluminum.
Yeah, it's great. And it's beautiful. I've seen it in person. I love it.
So I've designed it so you can attach the various pieces together and do kind of a zigzag thing so it can keep going across your bench.
For those of us who have any room left on our bench. And then your amazing tool, I have it here for tube cutting, which is pretty new. You came out with that late last year?
Actually, it really pretty hot off the press. When went into production at the end of last year and was out there in the world of January. So basically I brought it to 2 workshops, and then the lockdown happened, and so I've only been marketing that so far on my website.
Well, everybody needs to have one. It's amazing. It's really a great tool. I love it. Anything that makes my job easier. Because I don't think that most artists probably do, but there's a small percentage of new artists or metalsmiths who don't realize that time is your biggest expense. So if you're trying to make money and you're even make $30, $50, $60 an hour, that the time that you make to futz around with the process actually costs you more than your materials. It always shocks me when people are so obsessed about the price of silver, when in fact the labor is way outweighs the price of silver. So if you can figure out a way to cut even 5, 10, 15 minutes off of the piece you're making, it more than pays for the silver or whatever else is in the piece. So I love that you make tools that make me more money. Okay, let's see. The next question I have for you is along those lines, because most women have great ideas, and men too. Women often aren't taught when we're young things about machining or about mechanical things. It seems to be my dad was a mechanic, so he didn't even teach me things about machining or putting things together. I think he shared other things with me, but not that. So I kind of grew up thinking I need to ask a man how to make a tool. And so I wanted to know how you got the confidence, or what would be your advice to somebody who had a great tool idea but doesn't know anything about machining or even where to find out how to have something made. What would be your advice to them?
Well, I think probably the easiest thing to do would be to get in touch with other people who have made tools. And if they would be willing to give you some pointers, not necessarily pointing to a particular manufacturer, but again saying, well, maybe your state has a specific organization that will help you find somebody to make your tool in state. I know that a lot of governments have that. But really, I would say the best thing to do would be to ask around other people. There are many of us in the jewelry world who are making our own tools for manufacture.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I always feel like I'm bothering somebody, but you don't, it doesn't hurt to ask. They can always say no, and then you move on to the next person. But I know when I first started my businesses many years ago, I went to the retired group of men and women who did like a small business consulting for free. And I got a lot of great information from them. And I never occurred to me that I could find a group like that of people who maybe want to give back now and aren't working every day, and ask them, how do I do this? And I know there are other dealers that are very helpful. And I know some places like Eurotool, you can tell them your idea, and if they make the tool, they'll give you a royalty if you just don't want to be involved with the whole process of it. So it shouldn't stop us from coming up with more ideas and trying to make them come to fruition. But my hat's off to you, because you seem to be leading in that area, especially as a woman, which I really love. So yay. Okay.
To add a little bit to that, having my tools made entirely in Maine, and I started working with a man who made my jewelry cases back in my show days, and he had a wonderful cabinet making business, and so I worked with him. And then when he retired, he passed me on to another friend of his, and then all of the metal parts as well are made by the dad of one of my son's friends from school.
That's amazing. I love that. It helps your community, and it's a way to be that circle in your community. I love it. So now with this process, there's so many things. So you're cutting out your own blanking dies. You're using a hydraulic press. You do kambu. You're sawing. There's so many parts of it. What is your favorite technique of all of those things that you love doing when you sit down in your studio?
My favorite technique, I would have to say, I don't know that there is a favorite technique. The pattern development part, the sort of using my brain and trying to figure things out is absolutely the part that I love the best. But I like the tool. I love making jigs for the ear wires. I love figuring out how that can come about. So I would say that the thinking part of it all is what appeals to me the most.
Some of us, not so much. I like to turn on the torch. Anytime I can get my hands on the torch, skip the design part.
Well, maybe you noticed as you were looking at my jewelry that a lot of these pieces are cold connected. And I think that part of how I started down this path was I want to make pieces that don't have to be soldered, because I really don't have the torch. I'm very good at soldering, but it's stressful to me. I don't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've taken a lot of classes with a certain mentor, and he hates to saw, so he'll do just about anything so he never has to saw anything out. I think he hands it to his assistant like, here you go. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what's on your bench right now.
Well, this is a commission. It's a variation of my fiddlehead fibula, and it's for a friend of mine to give to his wife for Christmas. This whole collection, the fiddlehead collection, started as work for a show for Cherry Jewelry Art Gallery in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And that photograph there in the center actually made it onto the cover of the publication that year for the Signs of Life, which is what the show is called. And it was just a really wonderful combination of written work and jewelry.
Neat.
As well. So we were all assigned a writer after we had produced our piece and sent in our photograph, and wrote, whether it be prose or poetry, something that was inspired by that piece of jewelry. So it was really a wonderful thing to be a part of. And now my friend Julia is going to have a little bit of that story to wear around.
Nice. Those are always fun projects when you can do something like that. And it stretches you a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It does.
So
I enjoy having.
So sorry about that. So when you're designing and creating, you must create with an imaginary client in mind, or maybe you have a specific client in mind. And so when you think about her or him and you're making it, what is important to you about how they feel when they have your work or wear your work?
I want them to feel interesting. I want them to feel like whatever it is of mine that they're wearing, they'll attract very positive attention. So yeah, I just want them to feel more interesting. Like what I'm making for them is really becoming a good part of them, a real accessory.
Do you share this? Do you share the story of like these earrings that we're showing right now, which is the Columbine earrings? Do you share with them when they purchase it the story about the inspiration behind that, or do you just let them come up with their own?
No, I always share the story. I think that education is really a great part of selling.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I was doing the shows, and even for some of my galleries that I'm working with, I'll send them blanking dies and then a progression from flat shape to finished piece, so that they can also educate their customers.
That's fascinating. I love that, because then they really understand the handmade aspect of it and the energy that went into the piece and the value of it too.
Absolutely. It's very easy to see a piece of jewelry and kind of dismiss all of that, particularly if it's deceptively simple.
Correct. Yeah. I don't know how to make anything simple anymore. Okay, so if there's something, is there something that you do every day that makes you prepare yourself for being creative in your studio? And I'm going to show some pictures of your studio because artists always love to see everyone's studio. So thank you for sharing those pictures. But what do you do every morning when you feel like, is there a ritual? Some people have rituals before they go into their studio. Some people just go in and wing it. Is there something that gets you in that creative mood or that inspires you?
Well, what I have to do is get up in the morning and have breakfast and take the dogs out and play a bit. And then we go down and have studio snacks. Whatever it is I'm planning on working on that day, I have to make sure I have a really nice clear space. So I usually will start my day getting rid of the visual clutter.
Yeah. A lot of people can work in clutter. I cannot, but my studio is really messy today. But yeah, I am the same way. I'm showing a picture of your classroom. So you have a really beautiful open classroom too. Is that right next door to your studio?
It's all one big space. So this is a basement actually. And when we bought the house, I walked downstairs and there are all walls. I just had to move in the equipment and furniture.
Wow, that's
so
nice.
It's a room that leads into the next.
And the next photo that I'm showing is your lounge, which is very cool to have a little space to relax and chill and look at books and talk to other people. And of course, coffee. More coffee or tea. So what does your perfect studio day look like? And I'm going to show some pictures of my favorite furry people that are in your life.
Yes, there's my little Rosie girl. She's my new little pandemic puppy that came to us in March. So my day really does start with the pup. So I think I've probably already answered that question, that we get together and we have our studio snack time, which is a little bit of training. And then I just set out with whatever my goal was. And
what's the name of the other two?
So the other two are Ginger and Coda.
Aw. Oh, I had a Coda.
Oh, Ginger's a white little hound dog, and Coda is, both of them actually are Australian Shepherd mixes.
Oh, wow.
And an Australian cattle dog.
3 smart dogs that can get in trouble.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so how do you manage, I'm going to go back. So how do you manage your business tasks like marketing, packaging, shipping, sourcing with making tasks? So do you have certain days that you do your business stuff, or do you have certain hours in the day that you dedicate to those? How have you found to balance all of the things that have to be done?
Well, I do put everything down on a calendar, exactly when the deadline is and what time I'm going to allot to any particular task. I would say that sometimes I move things around on the calendar, and very often it just is determined by what that deadline is going to be. I don't spend a whole lot of time making these days. I spend more time teaching and preparing and designing and making prototypes for the tools.
Cool. And soon you'll be making that leap to online teaching, right?
Yes, I will be.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Well, I'll have access to you on a faster basis.
Yes.
So, do you enjoy selling your work, and what methods or venues do you love for selling?
Well, I really loved doing the shows, and but I became more and more involved in teaching, and that really happened back in maybe 2008. And these days, I actually am enjoying working with an apprentice named Barbara Hopkins. And
I love Barbara.
Do you know Barbara?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. So we received a grant from the Maine Arts Commission and the Maine Crafts Association, a craft apprenticeship program grant. So she's been taking up quite a bit of my time these past few months, and that's been fabulous. So we get together once or twice a week She goes on my calendar first.
Nice. Nice.
Mhm.
It's a good thing to have. It's nice also to have somebody coming in and giving you a different, fresh perspective that isn't family, that isn't a friend, that you can bounce ideas off of, and it infuses the energy too.
Yes, she's very prolific.
I'm I'm looking for someone that is here that I can have come in. I can teach them. I really want to give back to a person, to have them come in with no obligations, no expectations. Just someone that I can take from, say, a native beading. They just do beading, but maybe want to learn how to do some metals. And I think it'd be really nice to have somebody come over on occasion and give me a fresh perspective in the studio. So I'm going to take that and run with it. What you're saying is maybe that's what I need to be doing next.
Very rewarding.
Yeah. So as a final question, if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
That's so easy. Education and innovation are the keys to everything.
Well, that's perfect. That sums you up in a nutshell.
I really feel very strongly about it that, as you said, giving back through education is very rewarding. And also, if you don't know how to do something, then sometimes it means that it hasn't been done yet. So figure out on your own how to make that happen.
Yeah. What great advice. Okay, so I asked you to come up with your top 10 fun tools you love to use, and we'll do them Letterman style, working backwards. So here's your number 10, if I get to the right picture, which is the Kate Wolf wax trimmer.
So I use that very often in my teaching, and it's just a wonderful tool to use with a flex shaft in order to get a perfect right angle on the edge of something. So we use it in die making, we use it in wax carving, obviously. Silhouette dies, where you need a straight wall on the center of your cutout, and using cylinder burrs.
Do you use the one that goes at an angle too? Because I have that one and I use that often. Do you find that as useful? Yeah, I didn't know.
I don't use it as often because I'm not working with wax.
Okay.
Starters. I'm using this tool much more specifically.
So when you said this one, I didn't know if I put the right picture up or not. So I just thought, oh, it's probably this one. Okay, your number 9 is the Kate Wolf belt sander, and I have that right here next to me.
Use it all the time. It's a fabulous little tool. Your flex shaft fits right in, and it goes right on the bench. You can also fit that into a GRS Benchmate system. You just remove the ring clamp, and there's an adapter that can pop right in there, and it's wonderful. So I use that for sanding all the edges of all my little flat shapes after I've cut them out with a blanking.
That makes sense. It would make it a lot faster.
Use it the other way around than what you're showing there.
Upside down? Yeah. So do you just loosen the nut on the inside, and then that allows you to have it more flexible so you can do concave and convex shapes?
Yes.
I'm dying for her to get the new one out. I've been bugging Fordham every 3 or 4 months. When is it coming out? When is it coming out?
Well, Kate lives very close to me, and we get together quite often. So that's my question to her also.
I stopped bugging her because she would just say, go ask Fordham. Go ask Fordham. So, okay. I feel like I should have I think David Redman did like a pencil thing with each number that he did. So your number 8 was the Husky height adjustable workbenches.
These are so cool, and I have them in my studio. I don't know if you can't really see it in the background. No. So with these tables, I can adjust the height of the table. My chair stays exactly the same for the height I need it to be correct for my posture, which is wonderful. So depending on what task, if I'm sawing out a blanking die, I'm going to raise it up higher. And if I'm working on something where I have to look down over it, then I'm going to lower it. So I have 2 of those. those are now my jewelry benches.
Did you get it at Home Depot?
Yes.
I have the one, I don't have the bench, I have the cabinet that has the drawers underneath, and I have my rolling mill attached to it. So if I need to, I can raise it up to get it more ergonomics. And then on the other side, I have a shear on the other side.
Well, that's great because I have not seen that one.
Yeah, and I got it at Home Depot. Love it. Okay, your number 7 is the Bonnie Doon electric and manual presses.
Yes, so I have one of each. I feel very spoiled. Back in, I think it was maybe 1992 or 3, when I started using blanking dies quite a bit, I bought an electric press. And of course, it's twice as much now as it was then.
Yeah.
Just popped out thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of pieces with my blanking dies using my press.
Well, I imagine that you couldn't even think about going back to not having a press with your work.
No, I could not. So the first year of my collection, I started blanking out my pieces using a big bench vise, sandwiching my die with the metal inserted in between 2 pieces of plexiglass.
Oh, wow.
And pipe on the end of the handle of the bench vise so I could get the leverage I needed.
Wow.
The bench vise has pressure.
I think
and I've had that from time to time in workshops where they don't have Bonnie Doon presses or they don't have a hydraulic press.
I think it works in a pinch, but over time, ergonomically, it would take a beating on your body.
Absolutely.
Okay, your number 6 is the Fordham Flex Shaft Drill Press.
Fabulous. It just makes drilling so precise and so easy, and I break so many fewer drill bits using this.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's no wobble in
Mm-hmm.
my hand. It holds the drill bit very securely. I also use it for milling some of my jigs.
Okay, yeah, we use that for wax. That works really nicely for wax too.
So I'm just putting a cylinder burr in there and moving my piece around.
Love it. I have one too. I love all those. I love tools, so I never met a tool I didn't really like. Okay, your number 5 is the Fordham Workbench System, and I just bought this.
Isn't it great?
Mm-hmm.
It's just an organizational system ever.
Yeah.
And I couldn't go without it.
I don't know why I waited 20 years to buy one.
That and the plier stand. I have everything off the top of my bench, so I have plenty of room to work.
Yeah, I don't like stuff on my bench either, so you and I are like that in that way. Okay, your number 4 is the Fordham Bench Lathe.
Yes, and I also have the little exhaust system that goes with that, which is wonderful.
I didn't know if I should put that up or not because I thought, oh, well, maybe she doesn't like that one, so I didn't put it up.
No, it's wonderful, and you can actually use that as the exhaust system you can use as a separate system right in front of your bench pin to collect, dust. It's great for making non-conforming dies in acrylic, for instance, which we do in a couple of my workshops, and it just keeps that, all of the excess
away from your face,
all over the place. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think, the first 10 or 15 years that I was doing this, I was in that young, impervious phase of thinking, and I didn't really take into account, I don't really need that. I can just wear a mask and I'll be fine. In the last 5 or 10 years, I've really gotten safety conscious, and all of my extra money has gone into purchasing, dust collection, vacuum systems, because we will spend more on our health care if we don't. That at some point it's going to cost us one way or the other. So I'd rather have a tool than go to the hospital visits.
There. The other thing about that tool that's wonderful is the size.
Yes.
I gave away my big bench lathe after I bought that.
Yeah, it's a nice shape and size. I have one just like that for also lapidary for carving. So Fordham just cut off one end and put a spindle on one end for working underneath water so you can carve your stones. So I have that one. Then I have one I think it's second, I think Diamond Pacific reconfigures it, but it's the same tool. It comes from Fordham, I'm positive. But it's great, yes. So your number 3 is your Fordham Flex Shaft, which who could live without?
Essential.
Yeah. Do you have just the SRs or do you have a different one?
I have several, actually. Several different types.
Is there one that you use more than the other? I have an LX, and I have an SR, but I mostly use the SR.
I use the SR most of the time.
I just got a micromotor too. I have too many things.
I forgot that one.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Which one do you have? Which micromotor?
I have the little one.
The Fordham? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great for classes. You just throw it in your thing and go. Okay, your number 2 is your Jayne Redman wire and tube cutting jig, which I'm sure you don't know what that looks like. So mine is actually connected to my bitch pin. So she has this very clever, if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a hole there. But there's a hole there because there's a screw that can go into the bench pin system. So you can move this out of your way when you're, this way. When you're not working, you can move it out of your way, or you can pull it into the front to work. So it's an ingenious system. And also, I don't know if you saw, I can go back to that slide, but when you make an ear wire jig, she has also, you make a hole in it so you can put your ear wire jig right into your bench pin top. And so this jig, which the light is probably not going to show it, but there is a hole there that can be mounted on top of that as well. So it's ingenious the way these things work together. And then this thing slides. Say that again, Jayne?
It's all about hands-free.
Yeah.
Working.
Because there's nothing worse than not having enough hands. So this slides, and then you have your saw blade section here. Well, you can see it better on the screen, but I thought you might want to see one in person. And I think Jayne has hers there too. It might be a better picture. But of course, I had to have one as soon as they came out.
So the dovetail stop will slide down, so that will create the length that you need. And this saw guide actually is removable.
Oh, by just turning that knurled nut?
Just turn the knurled nut. You can remove that, and then I use this just with the flat face for when I'm clipping off lengths of.
Hold it up a little bit higher.
Okay. So when I'm clipping off lengths.
Oh, yeah.
And so just, pretend that those are cutters. So
yep.
I'm clipping off lengths of wire.
Oh, well, that's smart.
So you don't have to use the saw guide. If you want to use it left-handed, then you would just simply change. You can see this. So you would either put your little knurled screw in one way or the other, and then reattach it.
Oh, to the other side. Got it.
So it's left-handed or right-handed.
Well, that's smart.
That.
And I don't know if anybody can see mine, but I'll tell a little secret about the class. So mine has a hole in it, my bench pin, because you can get a tool at Home Depot or Ace or anywhere and make a hole in your bench pin to hold the trimmer. So it makes it even more hand-free when you want to do other tasks that require using the trimmer, like mitering the edge or cutting the edge straight with your cylinder burr. Having the hole is really easy. Yeah, well, I learned it at your class.
Here's another modification too, where I've made a smaller V for when I'm doing smaller piercing. And this little hole is where I actually have removed the handle from my old tube cutter. This, of course, is before I invented one of my own. And I can slide that down, and it's the tube cutter. I think it's a Bergeron, maybe. Mm-hmm. It has a handle that flips over,
Mm-hmm.
that holds, so that can just go right on and then slip a nut on the bottom of that. So again, that makes that tool easier to use.
Now, for some of you who have not cut blanking dies, make sure this is in the camera. This, I don't know if you can see it, but this is a dovetail plate that goes on your GRS bench pin system. And there's actually underneath here a little screw, and you use your Allen wrench, and it will then allow, as maybe Jayne can demonstrate on hers, it will allow it to turn at an angle, so it makes cutting out a blanking die at the right angle. There's like a little magnet you put on it. It tells you what degree you're at, and then all you have to do is saw according with your bench pin, sort of an angle. And it kind of is freaky at first. You're like, whoa, I'm trying to saw and it's at an angle. But it's really easy. It is super easy and really rewarding to be able to cut your own blanking dies. So if you have your own design, you don't need to pay extra money to have somebody do it for you. You can do it for yourself, and they work amazing. They're great. It's the best class I ever took. Loved it.
So the other great thing about that too is that when some of my pieces, I am experimenting with how they fit together and changes in increment, and I've had to cut 4 or 5 blanking dies until I finally get the right proportions. So it makes that process very immediate.
Well, and it would be really rough to wait, a couple months to get somebody to make one for you, and then you pay $200 whatever dollars, and you get it, and it doesn't work. That would be a bummer. Okay, so your number 1 favorite tool is, we sort of just covered it, but it's the Jayne Redman rotational bench pen. And then you've got the, is that purple hardwood, or what is that you can also get for the piece?
So we have the large bench pin that's 5x6, and then there's a smaller one that is 3x5, and then there's also the ring bench pin, and they're all purple.
That one's cool. That one is very cool. That's probably my next one, is the ring one.
So I guess you can see this pretty well. You can see how I've modified this surface, though, that I have little tool stands for my flex shaft tools. So whenever I'm working on a project, I can have everything I need right there in front of me instead of groping all around the top of my bench looking for those flex shaft tools.
That's smart. Yeah, that's smart. But it's like stationery. I like to buy stationery, but then I never use it because I feel like it's so pretty. Why would I want to write on it? And I'd be afraid of making holes in that thing, messing it up. But you just gave me permission, so maybe I'll try that. Take the leap. Okay, so I wanted to check the comments and see if anybody had any questions, because we're sort of at the end of all of those questions that I just hammered you with. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain and for being my guinea pig the first time.
Well, this has been a lot of fun.
So let me see if anybody has a question. I'm just going to scroll through here for a second. So Bonnie had a question that she said, I'm thinking for multiple tube settings for 3 or 4 millimeter stones, but I'm not sure what she's alluding to. Maybe she'll type in what she meant by that. Because unfortunately, the comments, the podcast is 30 seconds behind. So when we see a comment, we don't really know what your comment is about sometimes unless you write out what it's in regards to. She said, what's the shortest tube piece you can make with the tube cutter? What's the shortest you can cut it?
You can get right up to the very edge.
So you could cut it 0.5 millimeter long or 1 millimeter long, no problem?
Absolutely.
Great.
There is a little bit of an inset that I put in there on purpose because I use this. I'm not sure if you can see, but flip back to
I will go back. There we go.
There's a 2 millimeter inset that actually allows you to slip a smaller piece of wire underneath or tubing if you're cutting, so that the end doesn't flip up. So that would add 2 millimeters onto whatever it is that you want to cut. But but you can also just not use that part.
You know what I found is really helpful is a little tiny bit of Kate Wolf sticky wax in that groove, because I cut a lot of tubing just like 1 millimeter long that I use, and inevitably you get to the very end and you go really slow so it won't fly, and it flies anyway. And then you're spending 5 minutes trying to find it in your bench pan or wherever you're at. So just smearing a little bit of that Kate Wolf sticky wax in there. I love that stuff. I use it on everything, but it works really nice because it just holds it there. So if that helps somebody else. Let's see, who else might have a question? Oh, where is the best place to find your tools?
On my website.
And tell us the website.
It's www.jayneredmanjewelry.com.
Elizabeth wanted you to know that Rosie's gotten so big. Lots of
She'll see for herself.
Lots of comments about that you'll probably want to go back and read later, Jayne, about nice things about your tools and about how they love to use your tools in your classes. And then if you guys, I'm not seeing a whole bunch of other questions, but if you have one, you can post it, and I'm sure Jayne will look later and answer those questions as well, since she's a member of the group. And yes, we did have a bit of a volume problem in the beginning, but we remedied that, and I apologize, but this is our very first time. We're trying out a bunch of different systems together so that you can see the slideshow, which normally isn't something you can do through Zoom and Facebook. So we're doing kind of a new thing that I don't think anyone else has ever tried before. And so there was a little bit of a learning curve with the volume, but I think we got it settled after the first 5 or so minutes. So you probably just want to turn up your volume at the beginning if you're going to go back and watch it, because I know I saw some comments that some of you didn't get on until later. So when you go back and watch it, turn the volume up, but then turn the volume down before you have an ear problem. And let's see if anybody else had any questions. Oh, Donna put up your website for everybody. Yay.
Donna, that's great.
And I think that's it. So I don't think there are any other questions.
Okay.
Thank you so very much for being here today and answering all my questions and letting me pick your brain. And, you know, I hate that saying, but it's really what everybody wants to do. So I'll be the one that everybody can be mad at because I picked their brain for everybody else.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So you have a great day, and thank you, members, for coming in and trying it out and listening to us. And if you have any suggestions or questions, please post them, and we will make sure to follow through. So have a great day.
You too. Bye now.
Bye.